What are your views on the works of Fyodor Dostoyevsky? Hello guys and welcome to I Love Reading, a channel about interesting book-related subreddit topics. If you love our content, please press the like button, leave a comment and lastly, if you're new here, subscribe to our channel. Now let's get started. I think they're quite simply a lot of unfiltered emotions and the impact that they have on several aspects of life, from meeting acquaintances to kissing a loved one. They're incredibly insightful as they put characters on spots and show how they react based on personality and past behavior alone. They are quite literally masterpieces, but in their own way. They tell us about the different sides that one person may have and the different issues one may be going through. They also have a lot of perspective-based issues in the fact that one person may be rich to someone or lucky to someone and unlucky to someone else. To conclude, I think they're absolutely beautiful and must-reads for all. To those wondering, my favorite books are The Idiot, The Brothers Karamazov and Crime and Punishment. Reading Crime and Punishment at around 17 or 18 was an important moment in my life. I'd never had a reading experience like it. I felt like I was getting sick myself, being pulled deeper and deeper into the desperate situation and mindset of the main character. The resolution at the end felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. It was a effing journey. You somehow managed to avoid every spoiler in that comment while also perfectly analyzing it. How? Crime and Punishment is one of my favorite books. I read it through the Kindle app on my phone while I was in the army. It took forever, but it was great. Especially since my fiancée knows Russian and she was able to tell me all of the hidden word plays and stuff. I think what made it so fun for me though was that I didn't bother to try and analyze what I was reading like you would in a school setting. I just read it like it was a normal book and then thought about it after I finished it. It's one of the few books that I want to reread, but I am afraid to because I am worried that a reread will ruin it. They're great. I don't think I've ever read deeper moral and psychological exploration than Dostoevsky's. I am currently reading The Brothers Karamazov and I don't want it to end. Love them, but can only listen to audiobooks. The Russian names totally do me in, but listening you get the nuance in the voice that lets you know yes, they're talking about that same person with the other 16 names. Once that's out of the way, I've found them absolutely worth the billion-hour unabridged versions. I've only read Crime and Punishment. And it is one of my favorite books ever. I'm planning to read more works of Dostoyevsky. Dostoyevsky was an amazing author in many ways. What I really loved about his books is how real the characters are, from their emotions to their inner thoughts, and also how those emotions influence those thoughts, and then out into the open stage of the world through their actions. My favorite book is Crime and Punishment. He gets away with it, but not emotionally, and even worse, nothing of what he wanted to bring about came about. He made it worse for everyone, including himself. I think it's a book that details how we are prone to lie to ourselves and to how we can rationalize our way into very bad positions. By using our ability to reason our way into doing bad things. I have no doubt that The Brothers Karamazov is a masterpiece. I wish more people talked about how good it is, but I can understand why they don't since it's relatively dense. I've only read The Brothers Karamazov to date, but it is still the singularly most impressive novel I have ever read. The only thing to which I can equate it is a mental 12-round heavyweight fight. By the end you're stunned, drained, but on one of the greatest highs a book can deliver. I can't tell you how often, randomly, on trains, I think about it. I finished reading Crime and Punishment last spring and remember the deep feeling of ennui that followed. For the rest of the week I felt very distraught. The work had a huge gravity for me. The book hashed out the dangers of epitomizing logic in exchange for ethics, which many people, myself included, are apt to do. The Brothers Karamazov had amazing character development, all his books do really, and was another ethics exploration, focusing more on the place of religion in society. I especially liked the essay The Grand Inquisitor that's embedded in the text. They're chunky and the syntax is sometimes garbled from Russian translation, but Dostoyevsky is essential, in my opinion. I adore The Idiot despite, or perhaps because of, how deeply upsetting it was. While Crime and Punishment had an oddly uplifting end, and I certainly was moved by it, The Idiot elicited a stronger emotion and left a more lasting impression on me. I still find it slightly difficult to reread that book. Dostoevsky's stream of consciousness style created such intimate portraits of his characters. From Prince Mishkin to Svidrigailov, it was hard not to feel for his characters, the saint-like and the beastly alike. While I prefer his longer works, some of his short stories are wonderful too. The Dream of a Ridiculous Man and White Nights were striking reads. I really enjoyed reading The Devils and his short stories. The novel is quite the commentary on nihilists and the intelligentsia and what is expected when these two parties come together under the pretext of revolution. I have only read Crime and Punishment, Notes from Underground, and The Brothers Karamazov. I liked all of them, but the latter stands apart for me. The message of Crime and Punishment, which is profound in its own right, is just one of the interwoven threads of The Brothers Karamazov. Also random related pet peeve. When people read The Grand Inquisitor as a standalone piece and think of it as representing Dostoyevsky's thought. I remember being assigned it alone in an existentialism class in college. It's certainly an interesting chapter and impressive thoughtful experiment, but is really out of context alone. The Russian monk, the next chapter, seems much closer to the viewpoint Dostoyevsky's is endorsing in the novel. The Idiot might be my favorite book. It's Dostoyevsky distilled down to emotional essence. There is not a lot of politics, philosophy or other technicalities to get in the way of these piercing character studies. I've read this book several times in my life, first when I was a teenager and didn't understand much of it. Each time I've returned to it I learned something new about myself and other people. The characters have an almost mythical archetypal existence for me. I really want to read his work but struggle with which language to go with. I was raised in Russia and moved as a kid, so I read very well in English, but I wonder if reading it in the original language will give me the full experience. I just worry that reading it in Russian might be too difficult for me. I've read a few of his novels, Crime and Punishment, The Idiot, and The Possessed, or rather, The Demons, and each one had a different impact on me. All of them are top-tier literature if you like this style, but the one I enjoyed the most was The Possessed, or another translation is The Demons. It's about how people can be possessed by ideas, or perhaps even the influence of other people. If you're interested in history, social movements, and really deep characters, it's a wonderful book and, in my opinion, truly a masterpiece. I'm one of the approximately 3 people who didn't like Crime and Punishment much. I am somewhat ready to give it another go, but for now, it seemed not to click with me at all. I do enjoy the main character's dilemma as a theme of sorts in another books, so that's not it. He isn't too repulsive to me or anything like that. I think it's the alienating feeling of Russian literature as whole, as it is very strange field for me otherwise. The Russian critic Mikhail Bakhtin noted that virtually all of Dostoevsky's main characters are defined by the experience of threshold, unable to move towards a half-formed image of the way they could be, or society could be, but unwilling to move back either. This produces a strange sort of hysteria in them, which oscillates between agony and ecstasy, and actively resists the simplification of character into archetype. As Bakhtin put it, Dostoevsky always represents a person on the threshold of a final decision, at a moment of crisis, at an unfinalizable and unpredeterminable turning point for their soul. To modern readers, that aspect of his work can feel a little zany or anachronistic, but if you lean into it, the effect is still very powerful. Of course, it's important to see Dostoevsky's writings in context, as he seems to hear the music in distant rooms that weren't fully located within his lifetime. Whether that's his pre-articulation of Nietzsche, whose ideas seem to have found some inspiration or confirmation in Dostoevsky's novels, particularly Crime and Punishment and Karamazov. More importantly, although all of his work predates Freud's, you can often see Dostoevsky's intuitive sense of the subconscious, particularly in his tendency to turn to the inexplicable gesture over the statement lies privately crushing her finger in the door, after humiliating Alyosha in Karamazov, or Mishkin, trying to hide his face in a corner after being slapped by Ganya in The Idiot. He has a playwright's instinct for dramatic scene construction and the harmonic and dissonant potentials in dialogue, especially in his later work. Bakhtin phrased that aspect of Dostoevsky as the attempt to write a polyphonic novel, where the clustering of separate, hyper-realized voices could allow both those characters and the reader to perceive a broader perspective of themselves, and indeed that without these external perspectives, it is impossible to be wholly known to oneself or to others. One of the greatest masters of writing of all time. Crime and Punishment was a wild ride and at times made me extremely uncomfortable in ways I'm glad Dostoyevsky did in the end. Then I read Notes from Underground and felt the same thing again. I have The Idiot to read, but I want to finish some other stuff first. Growing up in Russia, we were supposed to read Dostoevsky at school, and I felt like I wasn't able to understand many things at that time. I read Crime and Punishment again later and it left different impression. I find his books very heavy and dark, like Summer in St. Petersburg, No Air, very suffocating. There you have it, interesting comments by Reddit users on their views on the works of Fyodor Dostoyevsky. Note: books talked about in the video can be accessed through the link on the description below. Thank you for watching till the end. If you loved the video, don't forget to press the like button and also subscribe to I Love Reading. See you on the next video.